The wormhole station Horizon Refuge was a place where dreams came to die, which was a charming way of saying it was populated by the universe's most desperate. It was a haven, sure, if you considered a haven to be a hulking metal carcass orbiting the event horizon of a wormhole that looked like it might up and swallow you for a light snack. Busy too, the place. Busy like a swarm of angry bees on amphetamines. Aliens of every imaginable shape and size scuttled through the halls, each carrying their own tragic backstory and questionable hygiene habits. Calum Voss stood at the observation deck, staring out at the swirling chaos, a coffee mug in one hand, and the kind of existential dread that only comes from being one of the few humans amidst a sea of what the hell are they. Horizon Refuge was the epitome of a bad sci-fi convention, complete with interstellar tourists who smelled like regret and bad decisions. Voss liked to think of himself as the station's unofficial philosopher, by accident more than by choice. "You think too much," Voss, Leshka growled, her three eyes focused on him like a particularly judgmental set of headlights. Leshka was one of the more tolerable aliens, largely because she possessed a sense of humor that was about as dark as a black hole's armpit. "It's either think or drink, and the last time I tried drinking, we ended up with that mess in Sector 3, Voss replied, taking a sip and grimacing as the coffee attempted to dissolve his stomach lining. "What's new in the world of impending doom? You know," the usual Leshka said, flicking a tentacle towards the swirling wormhole. "Unstable dimensions, existential threats, the odd black market dealer selling something that'll rot your insides faster than you can say bad life choices." Voss chuckled. So, a Tuesday. Behind them, the hum of the station was a comforting kind of chaos. Vendors hawked goods that defied description, scampering creatures bartered over ancient relics, and somewhere, a fight broke out between two races over what looked like a toaster. Voss watched the wormhole, which seemed to pulse ominously, as if it had a vendetta against linear time. "You ever think about what's on the other side of that thing?" Leshka shrugged, a gesture that looked more like a wave. "Mostly I think about how not to be sucked into it. Why, you planning a vacation? Oh yes, you know me, always looking for a good spot of cosmic annihilation, but there was truth in it. The wormhole was acting up, more temperamental than his last relationship, which had ended when his partner decided they preferred the company of someone with more limbs. Reports of dimensional anomalies were cropping up like weeds, making the already tense atmosphere on Horizon Refuge even more ripe for disaster, and Voss, in his infinite wisdom, was one of the few idiots trying to keep the peace. "Hey," Leshka said, nudging him with a tentacle, "you coming to the meeting later?" "They're discussing the anomaly," Voss sighed, the kind of sigh that suggested he was already regretting his life choices. Yeah, someone's gotta play the token human, and I guess that's me." As they walked through the station, Voss couldn't help but notice the fraying edges of the piece he'd helped broker. Refugees eyed each other like predators caught in a zoo with no walls, tension simmering just below the surface. It was the kind of place where you kept your friends close and a plasma rifle closer. Entering the cramped meeting room, Voss found a motley assortment of station representatives. There was Gref, a gelatinous blob who communicated via a series of unnerving burbles, and Trix, a mechanical being with a personality that was roughly equivalent to a malfunctioning toaster with delusions of grandeur. "Great, the gang's all here," Voss muttered, taking a seat that creaked ominously under him. "Let's talk anomalies, or as I like to call them, how the universe plans to screw us today." Gref burbled something that sounded like a cross between a fart and a death rattle. "That bad," Voss said, trying to decipher the gist of it. Trix's metallic voice crackled to life, the anomalies increasing in intensity. "We have approximately 2 weeks before the gravitational forces reach a level incompatible with life, which I assume is not on anyone's agenda. 2 weeks, that's optimistic. We should have planned a parade," Voss quipped. "If we don't solve this, the wormhole could collapse, or worse, it could open into, well, something unpleasant," Leshka said, her usual bravado tempered by genuine concern. "Unpleasant? Like my last blind date, or are we talking full-scale extinction event?" Voss asked. Leshka's silence was answer enough. The meeting dragged on, a cavalcade of doom-laden projections and panicked suggestions interspersed with Voss's increasingly desperate attempts at humor. In the end, it seemed the only plan they could agree on was to keep meeting until the universe imploded or they stumbled upon a solution, whichever came first. "Well, that was productive," Voss said, exiting the room with Leshka. "Like trying to put out a fire with a water pistol. You know, some optimism wouldn't kill you," Leshka chided. "No, but it might get the job done faster." They walked back towards the observation deck, the weight of impending disaster heavy on their shoulders. Out beyond the glass, the wormhole seemed to pulse with every beat of Voss's heart, a grim reminder that time was running out. "You ever wonder why we do this?" Voss asked, breaking the silence. Leshka glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "Do what?" Try to save a universe that seems hell-bent on self-destruction. Yeah, more often than I'd like. I'd make a terrible hero, Voss said, but I suppose someone's gotta try, Leshka chuckled, a sound that was all warmth and sarcasm. Hero or not, you're all we've got, Calum Voss. Voss stared out at the swirling mass of chaos, the anomaly looming like an unanswered question. The universe was unraveling, and somehow, improbably, it was his job to stitch it back together. No pressure. From behind them a klaxon blared, a sound that could only mean one thing, trouble. Trouble already, Voss said, rolling his eyes. Guess the universe couldn't wait for our scheduled meeting. They rushed to the source of the commotion, arriving just in time to see a group of aliens crowded around a malfunctioning energy shield near the docking bay. Sparks flew like an impromptu fireworks show, and the air sizzled with the smell of ozone. That's not supposed to happen, Leshka said, in the understated way one might mention a sudden asteroid collision. No kidding, Voss replied, pushing through the crowd. Everyone back, he reached the console, hands moving over controls with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent too much time dealing with similar disasters. Can you fix it? Leshka asked, peering over his shoulder. Oh sure, if by fix you mean delay the inevitable. Yeah, I can do that. The shield sputtered, flickered, and finally stabilized, at least for the moment. The crowd dispersed, muttering various expressions of thankfulness and existential dread. Another day, another crisis averted, Voss said with a grim smile. Leshka patted him on the back, a gesture surprisingly reassuring for a race that looked like a cross between an octopus and a nightmare. You really know how to keep things exciting around here. Tell me about it, Voss said, staring at the wormhole that loomed overhead, a cosmic reminder of the clock that was ticking down. Just another day in paradise. Calum Voss was many things, a human in a world of aliens, a reluctant philosopher, and a certified expert in disaster management. What he wasn't, however, was a politician. But as the anomaly outside began swallowing whole sections of alien regimes like a cosmic buffet, he found himself in the unenviable role of mediator, which was just a fancy way of saying he was trying to keep everyone from killing each other while the universe fell apart. Just another day in paradise, he muttered, heading towards the main assembly hall. The place was packed tighter than a can of sardines, if sardines came in a variety of colors and species. Every representative from every faction on Horizon Refuge had crammed themselves into the room, each more paranoid and trigger-happy than the last. If there was a handbook for how to handle an intergalactic crisis, it probably started with don't. Leshka trailed behind him, her tentacles tapping a nervous rhythm on the floor. You ready for this circus? She asked, her voice dripping with the kind of sarcasm that could strip paint. Ready as I'll ever be, Voss replied, taking a deep breath. Just gotta remind myself not to strangle anyone. Diplomatic faux pas, you know. The room buzzed with a low hum of tension, like a power cable about to snap. Voss took his place at the center, feeling the eyes of a dozen species on him. Gref the gelatinous blob sat to his left, burbling what Voss could only assume was the diplomatic equivalent of a sigh. Trix, the mechanical being, flickered impatiently, their face screen glitching in what might have been a nervous tick. All right, let's get this over with, Voss said, clapping his hands to draw attention. We all know why we're here. The anomaly's getting bigger, and if it keeps gobbling up sectors, we're about 10 minutes from full-blown anarchy. The Xantorians, a race known for their impressive tusks and even more impressive tempers, were the first to complain. This is unacceptable, their representative bellowed, tusks clacking like castanets. The anomaly has taken 3 of our outposts already. We demand reparations. Voss rubbed his temples. Reparations from who, exactly? The universe? Good luck collecting on that. The room erupted into a cacophony of accusations and blame-shifting, each faction louder and more indignant than the last. It was like a symphony composed entirely of screeching violins and off-key trumpets. Enough, Leshka's voice cut through the noise like a hot knife. Yelling won't solve anything. We need solutions, not a brawl. She's right, Voss said, nodding his thanks to Leshka. Look, I get it. We're all in the same sinking ship, and there's no lifeboat big enough for everyone. But pointing fingers isn't going to stop the water from coming in. A representative from the Krog Collective, a species that resembled bipedal lobsters, snapped their claws in agreement. What do you propose, human? Voss glanced at the swirling wormhole on the monitor, which seemed to pulse with malignant glee. First, we need to figure out what's causing this. Trix, the mechanical being, whirred, their voice crackling through the room. Preliminary data indicates a destabilization in the quantum substructure of the wormhole. However, the exact cause remains elusive. Leshka groaned, a sound that echoed Voss's own frustration. So basically, we know nothing. Not nothing, Trix corrected. Just very little. Comforting, Voss muttered. In the meantime, we need to stop the bleeding. If we can stabilize the sectors that haven't been affected yet, we might have a chance. The Xantorian representative snorted. And how do you propose we do that, human? Wishful thinking. I was thinking more along the lines of cooperation, Voss said dryly. But sure, if you've got a magic wand, now's the time. Before another argument could break out, the doors slammed open with the force of a small explosion. In strode a group of aliens clad in ornate armor, their presence as subtle as a sledgehammer to the face. The Zarnak Dominion had arrived, and they didn't look like they were here for a friendly chat. Voss felt his heart sink. Great, just what we need, a power-hungry regime looking to capitalize on chaos. The leader of the Zarnak, a towering figure with skin like polished obsidian, surveyed the room with a gaze that could cut glass. This meeting is over, they declared, voice booming with authority. The Zarnak Dominion will take control of the situation. Your bickering is a waste of time. Voss stepped forward, every instinct screaming at him to shut up and sit down. With all due respect, we were in the middle of an important discussion. We need to work together to solve this. The Zarnak leader's eyes flicked to Voss, a smile curling their lips like a snake with a secret. And you are, Calum Voss, an official mediator and resident human, he replied, trying to sound more authoritative than he felt. We're all in this together. Last I checked, even the Zarnak aren't immune to being sucked into a cosmic void. The leader chuckled, a sound that was more menace than mirth. Perhaps, but the Zarnak have resources and technology beyond your understanding. We will manage the anomaly, and in return, those who align with us will be spared. The room erupted again, this time with a mix of outrage and fear. Voss felt a headache brewing at the base of his skull, the kind that usually signaled impending doom. Let me guess, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. And anyone who doesn't align with you gets a one-way trip into the wormhole. The Zarnak leader shrugged, the gesture almost casual. Call it survival of the fittest. Leshka edged closer to Voss, tension radiating off her in waves. This isn't good, she whispered. We can't let them take control. Voss nodded, mind racing. The Zarnak were powerful, sure, but they couldn't be allowed to exploit the chaos, not if they wanted Horizon Refuge to survive. Listen, Voss said, raising his voice above the din. I know things are bad, but handing control over to the Zarnak isn't the answer. We're stronger together. United we stand, divided we fall, and all that crap. The Xantorian representative sneered. And what guarantee do we have that your way will work, human? Voss had nothing, no trump card, no ace up his sleeve, just the stubborn belief that somehow, against all odds, they'd figure it out. There are no guarantees, he said truthfully. But I'd rather go down fighting together than hand our fates over to someone who sees us as expendable. The room fell silent, the tension hanging like a storm cloud. It was a gamble, a Hail Mary thrown into the void, but it was all Voss had. The Zarnak leader laughed, a low, rumbling sound that sent shivers down Voss's spine. You have spirit, human, but spirit won't save you. Maybe not, Voss admitted. But it beats rolling over and giving up. The leader seemed to consider this, their expression inscrutable. Around them, the representatives shifted, uncertainty mingling with defiance. Finally, the Zarnak leader inclined their head. Very well, we will observe, for now. With that, the Zarnak turned and left, the heavy doors closing behind them with a finality that echoed through the room. Voss exhaled, feeling the weight of a bullet dodged, but it was a temporary reprieve, and everyone knew it. Great speech, Leshka said, her voice laced with dark humor. Hope it doesn't get us killed. Voss shrugged, the gesture more weary than resigned. If this doesn't work, nothing will, and if it does, well, maybe we can find a way out of this mess. The room slowly began to disperse, the representatives retreating to their corners with more questions than answers. Voss watched them go, wondering if unity was even possible in a place as fractured as Horizon Refuge. As he and Leshka made their way back to the observation deck, Voss couldn't shake the feeling that the clock was ticking down faster than ever. The wormhole loomed outside, a gaping maw threatening to swallow everything they held dear. Think we can pull this off? Leshka asked, her tone more hopeful than her eyes. Voss chuckled, a sound as dry as the desert. Let's just say I'm banking on dumb luck and stubbornness. The chaos of Horizon Refuge continued around them, life going on in spite of impending doom, and for now, that was enough. In the silence of the observation deck, Voss watched the stars twinkle beyond the wormhole's edge, each one a tiny beacon of hope in a universe that seemed hell-bent on destruction. Here's to surviving another day, he muttered, raising his empty coffee mug in a toast to the void. Leshka mirrored the gesture, her expression a mix of defiance and humor. To surviving, she echoed, her voice carrying the weight of a promise. And as the stars watched over them, the anomaly pulsed on, a reminder that the battle was far from over. But in that moment, with Leshka by his side and the weight of the universe pressing down, Calum Voss felt something dangerously close to hope, not that he'd ever admit it. Voss leaned against the cold metal railing of the observation deck, staring out at the mess of stars and thinking how much they resembled the chaos unfolding inside Horizon Refuge. If you squinted just right, you could probably see the lines of tension and grudges connecting each point of light. Boss, Leshka's voice broke through his thoughts, her tone carrying that familiar edge of sarcasm. Any chance we can just throw the whole damn station into the anomaly and call it a day? Tempting, Voss admitted, rubbing his eyes. But I'd rather not test if existential oblivion is covered under the intergalactic warranty. Leshka chuckled, her tentacles twitching in what Voss assumed was her version of rolling her eyes. Who'd have thought preventing a universal collapse would be so damn complicated? Not me, for sure, Voss muttered, glancing at the chaos below as groups of aliens scurried about like ants on a sugar high. I thought my biggest worry would be finding decent coffee out here. As if on cue, the station's communication system blared to life with the subtlety of a grenade going off in a library. Attention all residents and representatives, a voice announced, dripping with the kind of forced authority that made you want to ignore it on principle. The Zarnak Dominion is now implementing new measures for the safety and security of Horizon Refuge. Safety and security, Leshka snorted. Translation, we're about to make your lives even more miserable, Voss sighed. Well, if they can't fix the anomaly, at least they can ruin our day. The voice continued, listing a series of restrictions and regulations that made Voss's head spin. Curfews, rationing, mandatory Zarnak-approved leisure activities. It was like some kind of cosmic joke, and the punchline was everyone's slow descent into madness. You hear that, Leshka? Mandatory fun, Voss said, shaking his head. Because nothing says crisis management like compulsory Zarnak yoga classes. Guess they're trying to limber us up before they bend us over, Leshka quipped, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the crowd below. But seriously, how are we supposed to keep the peace when they're stirring the pot? Voss shrugged, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavier on his shoulders. If I knew, I'd be the one wearing the fancy armor and barking orders. As the voice droned on, Voss noticed the crowd shifting, a ripple of discontent spreading like wildfire. People were starting to look up at him, their eyes filled with something unsettlingly close to hope. Voss, a voice called out. Gref the gelatinous blob oozed over, his translucent body jiggling as he tried to maintain dignity. The refugees are looking to you for leadership. Me, Voss said, incredulous. What, did someone announce a sudden shortage of sensible options? Gref burbled, a sound like a wet balloon deflating. They see you standing up to the Zarnak. It inspires them. Great, Voss muttered, staring at the faces below. I inspire people. Just what I needed on my resume. He could feel the pressure mounting, like standing at the edge of a cliff and knowing the only way forward was to jump. What do we do now, Voss? Leshka asked, her voice uncharacteristically serious. Voss took a deep breath, the kind you take before diving into freezing water. We find a way to turn this mess to our advantage. Easier said than done. The Zarnak's iron grip was tightening, their enforcers fanning out like ominous shadows. Every corner of Horizon Refuge seemed to echo with their heavy footsteps. Looks like they're making themselves right at home, Leshka said, nodding towards a group of armored Zarnak patrolling the market area. Bet they even brought their own rug to tie the room together. It's like they're trying to win most overbearing occupiers of the year, Voss replied dryly. I'd say they're a shoe-in. The Zarnak's presence was doing wonders for the local economy too, if your business involved selling fear or frustration. Everything else was taking a nosedive. Hey Voss, Trix buzzed over, their face screen flickering like a malfunctioning neon sign. Got some juicy tidbits about our friends in black armor. Voss perked up. Yeah, please tell me their Achilles heel is something useful, like a soft spot for smooth jazz or an allergy to sarcasm. Trix's screen cycled through an array of colors that approximated a smirk. Close. They're overstretched trying to control the anomaly. Their tech is straining under the pressure. Voss grinned, an idea sparking to life. So if we can make a big enough mess, they might just topple over trying to clean it up. You really think we can out-chaos the Zarnak? Leshka asked, skeptical but intrigued. Chaos is the one thing I'm good at, Voss said with a shrug. Besides, what have we got to lose? Our dignity and sanity are already circling the drain. The plan was half-baked at best, but in a situation like this, half-baked was better than nothing. Voss began organizing, pulling reluctant factions together with all the charm of a used spaceship salesman. Listen up, he called, gathering a motley crew of species in a secluded section of the station. We're going to mess with the Zarnak's plans without actually breaking anything valuable. Think of it as constructive disruption. A Xantorian lobbed a question his way. How do you propose we do that, human? Throw a party and hope they join the dance floor. Voss smirked, feeling the old fire rekindling inside him. More like organizing a flash mob of chaos. We keep them guessing, make them chase shadows. By the time they realize what's happening, we'll have bought ourselves some breathing room. As the group dispersed, a sense of camaraderie began to form, like cracks in the Zarnak's carefully laid plans. Voss knew it was risky, but they were already out of options. The first strike came in the form of a misinformation campaign. Trix took to the station's communication network like a duck to water, spreading false alarms and phantom threats that sent the Zarnak scrambling in every direction. "They're jumping at shadows," Voss said, watching the chaos unfold from a safe distance. "Reminds me of my first date. Didn't know you were into panic as a pastime," Gref commented, his form rippling with laughter. "Only when it's someone else's," Voss replied, turning his attention to the next phase. The refugees, emboldened by their small victories, began to organize their own forms of resistance. A group of Vespara, known for their chameleon-like camouflage, used their abilities to create visual diversions that left the Zarnak stumbling in confusion. Voss couldn't help but feel a twinge of pride, as if watching a particularly unruly child finally stand up to the schoolyard bully. It was messy, chaotic, and utterly beautiful in its own way, but not everyone was so pleased. Some of the refugees, still wary of the Zarnak's retribution, approached Voss with trepidation. "Voss, what if this backfires?" a nervous Krog asked, claws clicking anxiously. "We could all be thrown into the wormhole as punishment." "Look," Voss said, meeting their eyes with a steadiness he didn't quite feel. "The Zarnak are already playing Russian roulette with our lives. All I'm suggesting is we tilt the odds a little more in our favor." The Krog seemed unconvinced, but as more refugees joined the effort, even the doubters found themselves swept along by the momentum. Meanwhile, the Zarnak leader wasn't oblivious to these disruptions. They summoned Voss for a private meeting, a summons that felt more ominous than a last-minute tax audit. "Mr. Voss," the Zarnak leader began, their obsidian skin catching the light in a way that made them look like a particularly stylish nightmare. "I must commend your tenacity. Few have dared challenge us so openly." "Thanks," Voss replied, trying to maintain a veneer of calm. "I like to think of it as a charming personality quirk." The leader's smile was as sharp as broken glass. "But charming quirks can become dangerous habits. I suggest you reconsider your current path." "Or what?" Voss asked, raising an eyebrow. "You'll make us do more Zarnak-approved yoga." The leader chuckled, though there was no warmth in it. "Continue your antics, and we might just find a more permanent solution to the anomaly problem." Voss's stomach lurched, but he didn't let it show. "Well, I'll keep that in mind next time I'm drawing up my bucket list." The meeting ended with the kind of tension usually reserved for diplomatic standoffs and really bad blind dates. Voss left, a plan forming in his mind even as the threat of cosmic annihilation loomed larger. "How'd it go?" Leshka asked when he returned to their impromptu headquarters. "Let's just say they're not sending me a fruit basket anytime soon," Voss replied, scanning the room. "But they're worried. We've got them on edge." Gref bubbled in agreement. "A cornered predator is often the most dangerous. Let's hope we can outwit them before they bite," Voss said, his mind already racing through the possibilities. As the station buzzed with activity, Voss knew their window of opportunity was closing. But for the first time, it felt like they might just have a shot. A long shot, sure, but in a universe where wormholes threatened to gobble up entire sectors, that was practically a guarantee. The next few days were a blur of activity, each new disruption keeping the Zarnak on their toes and the refugees hopeful. Voss found himself at the center of it all, a reluctant leader in a desperate bid for survival. But as the days dragged on, the strain began to show. Tensions flared, and the threat of Zarnak retaliation hung like a dark cloud over every victory. "We need to keep pushing," Voss said, rallying the core group around him. "We've got to find a way to stabilize the anomaly before the Zarnak decide to do something drastic." "Like what?" Leshka asked, her voice tinged with worry. "What could be more drastic than their current brand of help?" Voss didn't answer because the truth was he didn't want to think about it. The Zarnak were unpredictable, and if they decided to abandon Horizon Refuge to its fate, there'd be no second chances. "We keep them busy," Voss said instead, determination hardening his voice. "We buy time and we figure out a way to fix this mess." As he spoke, Voss couldn't help but notice the growing sense of camaraderie among the refugees. Despite the odds, they were coming together, proving that even in the darkest times, there was still a glimmer of defiant hope, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to see them through. The air inside Horizon Refuge was thick with tension and unfulfilled expectations, like the first day of a diet. Calum Voss watched the station's inhabitants scurry about, each carrying their own brand of desperation and defiance. He was the reluctant shepherd of this flock, a task he likened to herding cats if the cats were armed and had a penchant for rebellion. "Just another day in paradise," he muttered to himself, watching a group of riled-up refugees gather around a makeshift barricade. An impromptu protest, no doubt, Horizon Refuge's version of a block party. Voss approached, trying his best to look less like a leader and more like an uninterested passerby, failed miserably at both. Leshka was already in the thick of it, her tentacles gesturing animatedly as she riled up the crowd. Listen up, the Zarnek aren't the only ones with a say in what happens here. It's our home too. Yeah, a voice from the crowd shouted, though the support was more obligatory than enthusiastic. Voss pushed through, nodding at Leshka. So what's the plan? Wave some signs and hope the Zarnek decide to be less oppressive out of the goodness of their hearts. Leshka shot him a sideways glance. Oh, it's much more sophisticated than that. We're considering interpretive dance. Ah, I see, Voss said. That'll definitely get them to pack up and leave. Nothing like a bit of creative movement to scare off an occupying force. Your sarcasm is noted and filed under unhelpful, Leshka replied, rolling her eyes. Got any better ideas? Before Voss could answer, Trix buzzed over, their screen flickering like someone had slapped a disco ball onto a Roomba. Boss, got some news. It's not great. Of course it isn't, Voss sighed. Lay it on me, Trix. The wormhole anomaly's getting worse. It's now strong enough to mess with the station's structural integrity. Think of it like an intergalactic termite infestation. Fantastic, Voss muttered, rubbing his temples. Just when things were looking up. Looking up? Leshka asked incredulously. Did I miss the part where things stopped being utterly disastrous? Optimism is a relative term, Voss replied, feeling the weight of the impending doom settle on his shoulders like an unwelcome coat. This changes everything. If the station starts to fall apart, we're going to have a lot more problems than just the Zarnek. Gref the gelatinous blob oozed into view, his blobby countenance somehow managing to look concerned. This anomaly, Voss, can it be stabilized? Working on that, Voss said, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. But we'll need more than just good intentions. Which means, Leshka prompted. Which means everyone needs to up their game. Voss looked around at the crowd, his voice rising above the din. If we don't pull together and figure out how to stabilize this wormhole, we're all going down with this station. And I don't know about you, but I've got a strong preference for not being sucked into oblivion. The crowd muttered their agreement, driven more by fear than conviction. It'd have to do for now. As they disbanded, Voss found himself alone with his thoughts, each one a ticking time bomb. The station groaned and creaked, as if in agreement with his internal monologue. The Zarnak's presence might have been the match, but the wormhole anomaly was the fuse, and it was burning faster than ever. How do we even begin to solve this? Voss mumbled to the empty corridor, half expecting the universe to answer back. Instead, Leshka sidled up next to him. You doing okay, Voss? He shrugged. Define okay. Breathing, mostly sane, not actively trying to throttle anyone. By that definition, I'm the picture of health. Leshka chuckled, a rare sound amidst the chaos. We're with you, you know, even if your plans usually sound like they were cooked up by someone with a concussion. High praise, Voss replied. Maybe that'll be my legacy. He tried, despite his likely head trauma. They walked in silence for a moment, the gravity of their situation hanging heavy in the air. It was the kind of quiet that demanded action, not words, though Voss had always been better with the latter. Suddenly, a siren cut through the station, a wailing reminder that hope was a luxury none of them could afford. The Zarnak were on the move, their black-armored figures marching purposefully through the marketplace like doomsday accountants come to collect their due. We need to act, Voss said, the urgency in his voice undeniable. And fast. Agreed. But how? Leshka asked, glancing nervously at the Zarnak enforcers. Voss thought for a moment, the gears in his mind clicking into place like an ill-fitting puzzle. We need to find a way to disrupt their operations, something big enough to make them rethink their whole strategy. Sounds risky, Leshka noted, her tone suggesting she didn't mind a bit of risk herself. Risky is the new normal around here, Voss replied, already heading towards their makeshift base. Let's get to work. The headquarters was a cluttered amalgamation of various refugee tech and supplies, a testament to the ingenuity spawned by desperation. Trix was already there, fiddling with a console that looked like it had seen better centuries. You've got something for me, Trix, Voss asked, scanning the room for any signs of hope. Something and then some, Trix replied, the flicker of their screen suggesting a smile. I've been poking around the Zarnak systems. They've got a vulnerability, a big one. Do tell, Voss prompted, eager for any advantage. Turns out their internal comms are routed through a single node, Trix explained, their mechanical fingers dancing across the keyboard. We could theoretically hijack their entire communication network, and by theoretically I mean it's about as likely as Gref taking up ballet, but it's possible. Gref gurgled indignantly from the corner. I'll have you know my people have a long tradition of cultural dance. Then this should be right up your alley, Voss quipped, turning back to Trix. All right, let's see if we can pull this off. If we can mess with their comms, we can throw them into disarray. Leshka nodded, her eyes alight with the spark of rebellion. It's a long shot, but it might just buy us the time we need to deal with the wormhole. Precisely, Voss agreed, a sense of purpose settling over him like an old, slightly uncomfortable coat. Let's get moving. The team sprang into action, a flurry of activity that belied the chaos swirling around them. Voss could feel the momentum building, each small victory nudging them closer to the impossible. The plan, as always, was fraught with danger and a side of insanity. But then again, they'd never been the type to play it safe, not when the stakes were this high. As they worked, the station continued its groaning protest. Time, it seemed, wasn't on their side, nor were the laws of physics, but that was par for the course in their line of work. As Trix and the others delved deeper into the Zarnak systems, Voss took a moment to breathe. The air was stale, tinged with the scent of metal and fear, but it was the only air they had. He glanced at Gref, who was watching the proceedings with a mix of trepidation and something resembling admiration. "You ever think we'd end up here, Gref?" "Not in my wildest dreams," Gref replied, his form shifting like a lava lamp on a bad day. But then those dreams never included interdimensional anomalies either. "Strange how those never make the brochure," Voss said wryly. "But here we are, indeed," Gref agreed, looking contemplative. "Do you think we'll make it?" Voss considered the question, weighing it against the odds. "Honestly, I don't know, but we've got to try, because the alternative is letting the Zarnak win, and I think we both know how that ends." Gref nodded, the movement causing his gelatinous form to ripple. To trying, then, the words held a strange sort of power, a reminder that hope, however slim, was still in their grasp. Hours passed in a blur, the team working tirelessly as the station continued its creaking symphony. With each success, their spirits lifted, but the looming threat of the wormhole anomaly never strayed far from their minds. Finally, Trix looked up from the console, their screen flickering with excitement. "We did it, boss. We've got control of their comms." "Fantastic," Voss said, feeling the weight of the world, or at least this small corner of it, ease slightly. "Let's make some noise." With a few keystrokes, Trix unleashed chaos upon the Zarnak. Their carefully coordinated operations devolved into a cacophony of confusion as false alerts and mismatched orders flooded their channels. The station for once seemed to hold its breath. The Zarnak's frustration was palpable, their ranks breaking apart as they tried to regain control. Leshka watched the chaos unfold with a grin. "You did it, Voss. We actually did it. One small step for rebellion," Voss replied, watching the scene with a mix of pride and disbelief. "Now let's see if we can turn this into something bigger. Like a solution to our little wormhole problem," Leshka suggested. "Exactly," Voss said, his mind already racing with possibilities. "We've bought ourselves a bit of time. Now we just need to figure out how to keep the station in one piece." "You always have a plan," Leshka said, shaking her head in disbelief. "Not always," Voss admitted. "But sometimes a lack of options makes for the best kind of clarity." With the Zarnak in disarray and the clock ticking down to catastrophe, Voss knew their fight was far from over. But for the first time, it felt like they might just have a fighting chance. And in a place where hope was as rare as a quiet day, that was a victory all its own. Calum Voss stood at the heart of Horizon Refuge, trying to ignore the fact that his so-called allies were about as reliable as a wet noodle in a firefight. Which is to say, not very. The station was alive with a kind of desperation that made him feel like the captain of a sinking ship, and the Zarnak Dominion had just shown up with a few more holes for the hull. "Hey, Voss," Leshka nudged him, one of her tentacles waving in the direction of the Zarnak patrol. "Your best friends are here." "Wonderful," Voss muttered. "Just what I needed, a reminder that diplomacy is like trying to give a cat a bath. All claws, no purring." Leshka laughed, a dark, throaty sound that matched the mood. "At least you get points for effort." "Not that it seems to be doing us any good." He exhaled sharply, catching sight of the black-armored enforcers moving through the crowd like a bad rash. The Zarnak weren't known for their subtlety. Then again, neither was a nuclear explosion. "Yeah, well, my effort's about as effective as a chocolate teapot at this point." Nearby, Gref the gelatinous blob was trying to blend in with a group of refugees, which was about as successful as it sounded. His attempts were made more difficult by his tendency to ooze in all the wrong directions. "Voss, I believe the situation has become untenable." "Untenable," Voss echoed, nodding. "That's one way to put getting boned by the universe politely." Trix appeared at his side, their screen flickering with static and bad news. "Boss, the Dominion's got the station locked down tighter than a miser's purse. Curfews and rationing, mandatory leisure activities." "Mandatory leisure? What, are they gonna force us to enjoy ourselves now?" Voss barked a laugh, the sound harsh and hollow. "It's all a part of the charm," Leshka quipped. "Nothing says fun like enforced relaxation under military supervision." "Party of a lifetime," Voss agreed, rubbing his temples. "All right, we need to try for another meeting with the council. We've got to convince them to hold together. If they fracture now, we're all screwed." Getting the council together was like herding cats, except the cats were paranoid, angry, and carried plasma rifles. They met in what passed for a council chamber, a converted cargo bay that still smelled like it was waiting for a shipment. The ragtag group of leaders eyed each other warily, the tension as thick as Gref on a humid day. "Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted sentient beings," Voss began, trying for an air of authority he didn't feel. We need to address the wormhole anomaly and the Zarnak crackdown. If we don't act together, we're done for. There was a murmur of agreement, though it was more grudging than enthusiastic. Voss could feel the doubt hanging over him like a rain cloud with a personal vendetta. He cleared his throat, a sound that echoed through the bay. Look, he continued, trying to sound more confident than he felt. The Dominion's measures are a chokehold. We need to push back, but without giving them a reason to turn us into cosmic debris. One of the council members, a spindly creature resembling a cross between a spider and a lawyer, spoke up. And how exactly do you propose we do that, Voss? Your last plan was, shall we say, less than successful. Voss resisted the urge to roll his eyes. We disrupt their operations, throw them off balance. We've already messed with their comms, and that bought us some time. We need to keep them on their toes while we figure out how to fix the wormhole. And if we can't fix it, another voice chimed in, the tone as sharp as a knife in the back. What then? Then we're all in the cosmic blender, Voss admitted. But sitting on our hands won't help anyone. The murmur turned into a grumble, skepticism written across every alien feature, tentacled, scaled, and otherwise. Voss felt his patience wearing thin, like a frayed rope about to snap. As the meeting dragged on, it became clear that the council's unity was as stable as a house of cards in a hurricane. One by one the voices rose in dissent, each more fevered than the last. Voss could do little more than watch as the fragile coalition shattered like glass dropped from orbit. Leshka, he hissed, leaning close. This is falling apart faster than a cheap space station at high speed. I'd say you're not wrong, Leshka replied, her tentacles twitching with agitation. Voss turned back to the council, raising his voice above the chaos. We can't afford this. The station's on the brink of collapse, and the only way we have a chance is together. But his words were carried away on the tide of argument and fear, each member more interested in securing their own interests than the survival of the station as a whole. Voss felt the weight of it pressing down, a leaden despair that threatened to swallow him whole. All right, enough, he snapped, slamming his hand down on the makeshift table. You want to break apart? Fine, we'll do this the hard way. But when the Zarnak come knocking, don't say I didn't warn you. The meeting dissolved into acrimony, the council members departing with the kind of angry determination only the truly desperate could muster. Voss watched them go, the bitter taste of failure lingering like bad coffee. I think that went well, Leshka said dryly. Sure, if our goal was to make things worse, Voss replied, running a hand through his hair. This is bad, Leshka, like about to be fried by solar flares bad. Then we better start thinking of a miracle, Leshka said, her voice low. Because right now I'm all out of ideas. They lingered in the empty bay, the silence oppressive after the shouting match. Voss felt the pressure mounting, a relentless drumbeat in his skull. If they didn't find a way to unite the station, there wouldn't be anything left to save. Maybe we focus on small gains, Trix suggested, joining them. Hit them where it hurts, but keep it low-key. They can't retaliate if they don't know who's behind it. Like guerrilla warfare, Leshka mused. Only with fewer trees and more gravity malfunctions. Exactly, Trix said, their screen flickering with the suggestion of a grin. We can't fight them head-on, but we can make their lives miserable. Misery I can do, Voss said, nodding. All right, let's regroup and figure out our next steps. We've got a station to save and way too many people counting on us. The next few hours were a whirlwind of planning, a desperate attempt to wrest control back from the brink. Voss found himself leading a motley crew of insurgents, an unlikely band of misfits with a shared goal, survival. As they worked, the station continued its ceaseless groaning, a reminder of the ticking time bomb they were all living on. Voss could feel the anomaly's presence like a phantom in the room, an invisible specter threatening to tear their reality apart. He caught sight of Gref again, the gelatinous blob attempting to organize a group of refugees into something resembling order. It was a losing battle, but Gref's determination was almost inspiring. How's it going, Gref? Voss asked, sidling up to the alien diplomat. As well as can be expected, Gref replied, his form shifting uneasily. Which is to say, not very. Welcome to the club, Voss said, clapping him on what he hoped was a shoulder. We'll figure something out, somehow. I hope you're right, Gref said, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 doubts. They worked late into the station's artificial night, the glow of consoles the only illumination in the dim confines. Each plan they concocted felt like a patchwork quilt, hastily sewn together with threads of desperation and a splash of insanity. But as the hours dragged on, Voss felt the first stirrings of hope, a fragile thing but present nonetheless. They were running out of time, out of options, but not out of fight. With Trix's help, they managed to sow chaos among the Zarnak ranks, small acts of sabotage that went unnoticed, but added up to a mountain of inconvenience. It was a victory, however small, and Voss clung to it like a lifeline. But the anomaly loomed ever-present, a reminder of the sword hanging over their heads. They needed a solution, and fast. Leshka joined him at the central console, her presence a comforting one. "What's our next move, Voss?" "We keep pushing," Voss said, his voice steady. "Every setback is a step in the right direction. We just need to keep them guessing long enough to fix the wormhole. And if we can't," Leshka asked, the question hanging heavy between them, "then I guess we'll all find out what's on the other side," Voss replied, a grim smile tugging at his lips. "But until then we fight." As they continued their work, Voss felt the camaraderie building, a sense of unity among the chaos. They were a ragtag bunch, but they were his ragtag bunch, and for better or worse, they'd face whatever came next together. The station shuddered again, a reminder that their time was running out, but Voss refused to let the darkness swallow them. Not yet, not today. "To hell with the odds," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "We've come this far, we'll find a way." And with that, he threw himself back into the fray, determined to beat back the chaos one step at a time. Calum Voss surveyed the chaos of Horizon Refuge, his thoughts ping-ponging between disaster scenarios like a cosmic game of dodgeball. The station was a sardine can of anxiety, each occupant a rattling fishbone in the maw of the Zarnak Dominion. The Zarnaks had imposed their idea of order, which was akin to letting a butcher organize a tea party, clumsy, bloody, and with all the finesse of a drunken space miner. "Mandatory leisure activities," Voss muttered, shaking his head. "Next, they'll demand we smile while they shove us out the airlock." Leshka sidled up, her tentacles curling with an energy that suggested she might strangle someone if given half a chance. "Their idea of fun probably involves a ceremonial poking with sticks. Speaking of sticks, we need something more substantial if we're going to make it through this mess," Voss replied, his mind racing. "We can't keep playing defense, hoping the wormhole won't toss us into a dimension made entirely of firestorms and bad pop songs." As if sensing his desperation, Trix appeared, their screen flickering in its usual jittery dance. "Boss, we've got a bit of a situation." "Just one? I was starting to worry we'd run out," Voss said, his voice thick with sarcasm. Trix's digital face twisted into a grimace, or as close to one as a hologram could manage. "It's the wormhole anomaly. I've been analyzing it, and it's not just a space-time pimple waiting to pop. There's something weird about its structure." "Weird how? We talking odd smell weird or tentacles where there shouldn't be weird?" Leshka asked, her tone cutting through the tension like a plasma blade. "Think of it as a cosmic telephone line," Trix continued, ignoring Leshka's quip. "I think we can send messages through it." Voss blinked, the weight of Trix's words sinking in. "You're saying we can communicate through the wormhole, with whatever's on the other side?" "Exactly. If we can hijack its frequency, we could connect with other dimensions, possibly even call for help." "Help from who?" Leshka scoffed. "The interdimensional cavalry, the Federation of even more screwed." "Maybe," Trix replied, undeterred. "But it's a chance to rally allies, maybe spark a resistance. The Zarnaks think they've got us pinned, but they don't know what we're capable of." Voss felt a flicker of hope, an ember in the cold void of despair. "It's a long shot, but it's better than waiting to be space dust." "What do we need?" Trix's hologram blinked with excitement. "We'll need to redirect power to the communication systems, modify the frequency modulator, and get past the Zarnak sensors without setting off every alarm in the sector." "Piece of cake," Voss said dryly. "And by cake, I mean something baked in Hell's Kitchen with a side of panic." Leshka nodded. "I'll get the crew together. We'll need Gref's help with the refugees. Keep them calm while we rip the guts out of the station." "Good. Let's move before the Dominion realizes we're up to something more than just sitting around with our thumbs up our exhaust ports." As Voss and his ragtag team sprang into action, the station continued its ceaseless groaning, a metallic chorus singing the song of impending doom. They worked like a well-oiled machine, assuming that machine had been cobbled together from spare parts and duct tape. Voss found Gref amid the throng of refugees, the gelatinous blob attempting to soothe nerves with all the effectiveness of a one-legged man at a butt-kicking contest. "Hey, Gref," Voss called, sidling up to the alien. "We could use your calm demeanor. Think you can keep everyone from imploding while we try to save the day?" Gref oozed what could only be called resignation. "I'll do my best, but I'm not making any promises." "Good enough." Voss clapped him on what he hoped was a shoulder. "Just keep them busy. We'll handle the rest." With Gref on crowd control, Voss turned his attention to the task at hand. The heart of the station hummed with potential energy, a sleeping giant waiting for a reason to wake and punch someone in the face. Leshka was already there, her tentacles a blur of motion as she rewired circuits with the casual expertise of someone who'd done this dance too many times before. "I've got the power rerouted. Just say the word." "Let's do it," Voss said, determination settling into his bones like an old friend. "Time to see if we can make a cosmic call without blowing ourselves up." Trix interfaced with the station systems, their screen alive with schematics and data streams. "I'm patching into the anomaly's frequency. Get ready for some interdimensional interference." They worked in silence, the tension thick enough to slice with a knife. Voss could feel the station trembling beneath his feet, the anomaly's presence a weight pressing down from all sides, and then, with a crackle of static that set his teeth on edge, they made contact. A voice, or what might have been a voice, echoed through the comms, distorted and strange. "Hello, who's on this frequency? Identify yourself." Voss's heart skipped a beat. "This is Horizon Refuge, under threat by the Zarnak Dominion. Who are you?" "Name's Captain Zira," the voice replied, amusement lacing the words. "And you're a long way from home, aren't you?" "You could say that," Voss replied, trying to keep his tone light. "We could use some help if you're willing." "Help, huh?" Zira's voice was skeptical, but Voss could hear a flicker of interest. "And what's in it for us?" "Well, apart from not being obliterated by a rogue wormhole anomaly, you get a front row seat to the fall of the Zarnak Dominion." "Interested yet?" There was a pause, the kind that made Voss's palms sweat. "Sounds like a party," Zira finally said. "All right, count us in." Voss exhaled, a feeling of relief washing over him. "Good, we'll keep the channel open as long as we can." "Get here fast." As Zira's voice faded, Voss turned to his crew, a grin creeping onto his face despite the dire circumstances. "Looks like we've got ourselves some backup." Leshka's tentacles twitched with barely contained excitement. "Knew you had a knack for making friends in the worst places." "Yeah, just call me the life of the interdimensional party," Voss said. "Now let's make sure we're ready for when they arrive." With the prospect of reinforcements, the station's mood shifted. It wasn't quite hope, but it was close enough to breathe life into their flagging spirits. Word spread quickly, a buzz of anticipation rising above the usual hum of despair. Voss and his team worked tirelessly, each task a step towards survival. The artificial night wore on, the station's pulse steady, if faintly erratic. As they prepared for the arrival of their new allies, Voss couldn't shake the feeling that they were teetering on the edge of something monumental. Either they'd pull off the impossible, or they'd go down in a blaze of glory, possibly both. "How long until they get here?" Leshka asked, her voice low and tense. "Not long," Voss replied. "We just need to hold the line until then. No pressure," Leshka said with a wry smile. "Just the fate of the universe and all that." "Exactly. Let's show the Zarnaks they picked the wrong station to mess with." The station shuddered again, the anomaly's presence a constant reminder of their precarious position. But for the first time in a long time, Voss felt a flicker of something more than just survival, a determination to fight back, to stand against the odds. As the hours ticked by, the station's defenses were bolstered, the crew's resolve hardened. Voss knew they were facing an uphill battle, but for the first time, it felt like a battle they might actually win. And so they waited, each moment stretching into eternity, their fate hanging by the thinnest of threads. But Voss refused to let fear rule them, not while there was still a chance to turn the tables. "To hell with the odds," he muttered once more, the words a mantra against the darkness. "We'll make our own luck." When the first signs of their allies' arrival flickered on the sensors, a cheer went up, the sound echoing through the battered station like a clarion call. They had a fighting chance, and for Voss, that was all he needed. As the reinforcements began to pour through the wormhole, Voss felt a surge of adrenaline, a fierce determination to see this through no matter the cost. The Zarnaks might have underestimated them, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. "All right, everyone," Voss called out, his voice carrying through the station. "Let's give them hell." With that, they braced for the fight of their lives, ready to take on whatever the universe threw their way. Voss glanced at his crew, a ragtag bunch if ever there was one, and felt a swell of pride. Together, they'd stand against the tide. Together, they'd fight back, and maybe, just maybe, they'd win. The station's mood had shifted from abject despair to something resembling cautious optimism, but only if you squinted hard enough and didn't think about it too much. Voss stood by the main console, directing the chaos with the energy of a caffeinated cat herder. Leshka was beside him, tentacles darting across controls like a concert pianist on speed, while Trix continued to monitor the incoming data from their new cross-dimensional allies. "So these guys are legit, right?" Leshka asked, her voice laced with skepticism. "They're not going to turn us into space dust the minute they arrive." "They seemed friendly enough," Voss said with a shrug. But then again, so did the Zarnaks before they decided to play dictator of the universe. "Friendly's overrated," Leshka shot back. "I'll settle for not actively trying to kill us." The comm system crackled, and Captain Zira's voice filtered through, sounding clearer now, like they'd finally found the right frequency. "Horizon Refuge, this is Captain Zira. We're coming through in force." "Just try not to shoot us, yeah?" Voss grinned. "No promises, we're a jumpy bunch. Jumpy I can handle, just don't be stupid." There was a pause. "We've dealt with enough stupid this side of the wormhole." "I can relate," Voss said, exchanging a glance with Leshka. "See you soon, Captain." The comm went silent, leaving the station's usual clamor to fill the void. The refugees were an uneasy mass, still unsure whether to hope or despair. Gref was doing his best impression of a gelatinous peacekeeper, but it was like trying to use a marshmallow to plug a leaky dam. How's the crowd control, Gref? Voss asked over the station's PA system. Gref's voice oozed through the speakers. Oh, just keeping the pitchforks and torches at bay. Keep up the good work, Voss replied. You're doing Blob's work. Very funny. With the imminent arrival of reinforcements, Voss's plan was finally kicking into gear. The Zarnak Dominion, with its penchant for authoritarian boredom disguised as order, had underestimated just how much people could despise enforced fun. Their new measures had sparked nothing but resentment, the kind that could be weaponized with a little push, or a big push if that's what it took. Voss and Leshka had devised a strategy that they hoped would exploit the Zarnak's hubris. The Dominion relied heavily on their automated systems and predictable protocols, convinced that no one would dare challenge them head-on. But Voss had always believed in the power of doing the unexpected, like inviting interdimensional allies to what was likely to be the most chaotic party this side of the galaxy. As the Allied ships began to emerge from the wormhole, Voss couldn't help but feel a swell of something dangerously close to hope, not that he'd ever admit it. His whole philosophy was built around expecting the worst and finding a way to survive it. Captain Zira hailed them again. We're in position, ready to disrupt some Zarnak tea parties. Absolutely, Voss replied. Let's make it a party they won't forget. With a few swift commands, Trix initiated the plan. The station's comms blared with the blinding roar of 1,000 voices, a cacophony of insults, rebellious chants, and derisive laughter directed squarely at the Zarnak forces. It was a symphony of resistance, orchestrated to throw their enemies into disarray. Sounds like a revolution, Leshka said, her tentacles working furiously. Or a really bad karaoke night, or both, Voss said. Let's keep it going. Time to show the Zarnaks that sometimes the pen, or in this case, the microphone, is mightier than the plasma cannon. The Zarnak forces, so used to blind obedience and orderly subjugation, were caught off guard. Their attempts to quell the uprising were met with mockery, taunts, and loud renditions of the most obnoxious songs Trix could find in their database. The station's occupants, fueled by the unexpected surge of rebellion, joined in with gusto. Meanwhile, Captain Zira's forces began their assault on the Dominion's external defenses. They swooped in with precision, exploiting every gap and weakness that Voss and his team had identified. It was a blitzkrieg of chaos, a tactical mind game that left the Zarnaks scrambling. This is actually working, Leshka marveled, her face a mix of disbelief and delight. I can't believe it. Neither can I, Voss admitted, but I'm not about to question it. As the battle continued, the Zarnak command structure began to unravel. Their measures of order and control, so meticulously planned, were no match for the unexpected tide of resistance. The Dominion, it turned out, was built on the flimsy foundation of fear, and once that fear was stripped away, their power crumbled. In the midst of the chaos, a direct line opened between Horizon Refuge and the Zarnak Command. The Dominion's commandant, a beetle-like creature with an unfortunate resemblance to a particularly grumpy dung beetle, appeared on screen. You think you can defy the Zarnak Dominion and live to tell the tale? The commandant's voice was an angry hiss, their mandibles clacking in agitation. Voss smiled, the kind of smile that promised trouble. Oh, I don't just think we can, I know we can. You'll be crushed for this insolence. Maybe, Voss said with a shrug. But you're gonna have to catch us first. As the commandant sputtered impotently, Voss cut the transmission with a flourish. It was a small, petty victory, but sometimes those were the sweetest. Back on the station, the mood was one of jubilant defiance. The refugees, once resigned and downtrodden, had found a spark of resistance. The Zarnaks, meanwhile, were in full retreat, their forces unable to withstand the combined might of the station's uprising and Zira's mercenary strike. In the aftermath, Voss found himself standing beside Captain Zira on a balcony overlooking the station's central hub. It was a mess of debris and scattered possessions, a testament to the turmoil of the past Iors. But it was also a symbol of something new, a flicker of hope in a world that had long forgotten what hope felt like. Not bad for day's work, Zira said, leaning on the railing with a casual grace that belied the ferocity of the battle they'd just waged. Yeah, well, I'm all about exceeding low expectations, Voss replied. Zira chuckled. You've got a knack for that, I'll give you that much. Leshka joined them, a look of satisfaction on her face. I'd say we've earned a drink after this, Voss nodded, or several, preferably of the strong variety. As they left the balcony, Voss couldn't help but glance back at the station. It wasn't much, a battered hunk of metal floating in the void, but it was theirs. And for the first time in a long time, they'd shown that they weren't just pawns in someone else's game. The battle might have been won, but the war was far from over. The Zarnaks would regroup, and there would be more challenges ahead. But for now, they'd celebrate their victory and take solace in the knowledge that they'd accomplished the impossible. Back in the heart of the station, the atmosphere was electric. The refugees had transformed from a disparate group of survivors into a community united by shared purpose. They tasted freedom and found it to be far sweeter than the bland safety the Zarnax had promised. Voss and his crew, including their newfound allies, found themselves at the makeshift bar in the station's cantina. The drinks were of questionable origin and dubious quality, but no one seemed to care. They toasted to their survival, to their victory, and to the hope that had finally taken root. "So what's next?" Leshka asked, downing a shot with practiced ease. "We've pissed off a galactic empire. Where do we go from here?" Voss leaned back, a grin on his face. "We keep moving forward. There's always another fight, another battle to win." Captain Zira raised a glass. "And with allies like us, you've got a fighting chance. To unlikely friendships," Voss said, raising his own glass. "To defying the odds," Leshka added. "To the Zarnax," Gref said, surprising everyone with his rare attempt at a joke. "May they always underestimate us." The laughter that followed was loud, genuine, and a reminder that sometimes, even in the darkest of times, there was room for hope. It was a small victory, a fleeting moment of triumph, but it was theirs. Together, they'd faced the darkness and lived to tell the tale. And no matter what the future held, they were ready. Because the universe might be a vast, uncaring expanse, but they'd shown that sometimes the little guys could punch above their weight. As the celebrations continued, Voss could almost hear the Zarnak Dominion seething in their distant strongholds, plotting their next move. Let them come, he thought. They'd learned that when pushed, even the most unlikely of heroes could rise. "To us," Voss said once more, his voice resonating with the determination of someone who'd faced the abyss and refused to back down. "We've earned it," and as the night wore on, filled with laughter and camaraderie, they knew that whatever lay ahead, they'd face it together. It wasn't perfect, and it sure as hell wasn't easy, but it was a start, and sometimes that's all you need. Calum Voss sauntered through the aftermath of the chaos, trying to appear more composed than the station's corridors, which looked like they'd been redecorated by a hurricane with grandiose ideas. The wormhole anomaly, now stabilized, hung in the void like a cosmic eye, watching as if it were as surprised as anyone that everything hadn't descended into a smoking pile of cosmic debris. "Well, isn't this just a lovely scene?" Voss muttered, surveying the mayhem. "Kind of like a family reunion if your family was a bunch of aliens who really didn't want to be here." Leshka slithered by, her tentacles moving with a grace that belied the frantic pace of her thoughts. "I never thought I'd say this, but I think I'm actually grateful for the wormhole stabilizing. Careful, or people might start thinking you're an optimist," Voss quipped, dodging a haphazardly flying drone that seemed to be running on spite and leftover adrenaline. "Not likely," Leshka replied, continuing her surprisingly nimble dance through the chaos. "But even I can appreciate not being sucked into another dimension." Voss nodded, glancing at the refugees milling about. They were still a patchwork of species and temperaments, but there was something different now, a shared sense of victory, or maybe just relief that they hadn't all become space dust. In the corner, Gref the gelatinous blob was doing its best to blend in, which mostly involved not moving and hoping no one noticed. "Hey, Gref," Voss called out, grinning. Still holding the fort, Gref jiggled in what might have been a nod. "Yeah, just keeping the peace, or at least trying to. You're a regular diplomat," Voss said, giving the blob an encouraging slap that made his hand bounce off like a rubber ball. He moved on, catching sight of Trix, who was immersed in her console, monitoring the data like a hawk on a sugar high. "How's it looking, Trix?" "Any more surprises up the wormhole?" Trix didn't look up, her fingers flying over the controls. "Nope, stable as a politician's promises right before election time. We're getting stable readings and potential visitors from the other side." "Great, maybe they can bring snacks," Voss replied, leaning over to see the data himself. Lines of code and graphs that might as well have been ancient hieroglyphs to him scrolled past. "So what do we do now? Throw them a welcome party? Depends on your idea of hospitality," Trix said dryly. "I'm just hoping they don't expect us to roll out the red carpet. It's more like a faded brown rug around here." As Voss wandered, the comm system crackled, and Captain Zira's voice echoed through the station, smooth and confident. "All quiet on the Zarnak front. They're pulling back, probably licking their wounds and plotting their next step." Voss smirked, a sardonic edge to his grin. "Let him plot. We've got our own plans to make." Zira chuckled, her voice warm with camaraderie. "You know, I didn't think we'd get this far. I thought we'd end up as a cautionary tale. Well, here we are. Living proof that sometimes the idiots win out of sheer stubbornness," Voss replied, a touch of pride in his voice. As he continued his rounds, there was a tangible change in the air of Horizon Refuge. The refugees, once an uneasy collection of strangers, now felt like something resembling a community, or at least a group of people who tolerated each other long enough to survive. Even the Zarnak-imposed curfews and mandatory leisure activities seemed like a distant memory. Voss paused at a viewport, staring out into the star-speckled void. The wormhole anomaly shimmered, a silent reminder that the universe was far stranger than any of them had ever given it credit for. So, this is what victory feels like, Voss mused, feeling the weight of his own cynicism lighten just a fraction. Not quite as glamorous as I imagined. Leshka joined him, folding her tentacles into something approximating arms. Victory's messy, but at least we get to complain about it together. Here's to complaining, Voss said, raising an imaginary glass, and to whatever comes next. The station's atmosphere was cautiously optimistic, a fragile thing but more than they'd had before. Even the Zarnak Dominion's idea of order, with its curfews and rationing, seemed like a bad dream. There was a flicker of hope, awkward and unfamiliar, but undeniably present. So, Voss, Leshka said, looking him over with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. What's the plan now that we've slightly annoyed a galactic empire? Voss shrugged, his trademark smirk firmly in place. Keep annoying them. It's a hobby now. Maybe open a tourist trap for interdimensional visitors. Come see the station that defied the odds and pissed off the Zarnaks. Catchy, Leshka remarked, her tone as dry as the Sahara. Do you think they'll buy it? They might, Voss replied, glancing at the wormhole again. Or maybe they'll just be entertained by the spectacle. Either way, it's better than being another starry statistic. The refugees, sensing the station's newfound unity, had begun to forge connections, sharing stories in an impromptu blend of languages and gestures. Even Greff, who had spent much of the time blending into the background, was pulled into conversations, their gelatinous form a surprisingly good listener. Voss and his crew returned to the cantina, where the atmosphere was surprisingly jubilant. The drinks were still as questionable as ever, but the camaraderie was real, a balm for the frayed nerves and battle-worn minds. Raising a glass, Voss looked around at the motley crew, his eyes resting on Captain Zira, Trix, Leshka, and even Greff. To strange alliances and improbable victories. To the wormhole, Leshka added. Let's hope it brings us friends instead of cosmic invaders. And to the Zarnaks, Trix said with a wicked grin, may they always underestimate the underdogs. They drank, laughing at the absurdity of their situation. The future was uncertain, the threat of the Zarnaks ever-present, but they were ready to meet it head-on. After all, they'd already done the impossible once. As the night wore on, Voss found himself reflecting on the unintended impact of his actions. He'd set out to stir the pot, to disrupt the Zarnak Dominion's oppressive order, but in doing so, he'd accidentally fostered a sense of unity among the station's inhabitants. A unity that might just be their greatest defense against whatever came next. Funny, isn't it? Voss mused, more to himself than anyone else. What's that? Zira asked, curiosity piqued. How chaos can sometimes bring people together, Voss replied, his voice thoughtful. I didn't plan for any of this, but here we are. That's the thing about plans, Zira said with a knowing smile. They rarely survive contact with reality. Truer words, Voss agreed, toasting to the sentiment. Here's to the future, uncertain as it is. With the wormhole anomaly stabilized, there were whispers of potential future interactions between dimensions, of alliances that could be forged, and of the possibilities that lay beyond the boundaries of their known universe. Think we could handle more allies from other dimensions? Leshka asked, her tone teasing but with an undercurrent of genuine curiosity. Why not? Voss replied. We've already made friends with each other. How hard could it be? The laughter that followed was genuine, a mixture of relief and anticipation for what was to come. They'd faced down their fears, defied the odds, and discovered that sometimes, even in the darkest times, hope could be found in the most unlikely places. Together, they'd created a new beginning, one that was as unpredictable as the universe itself but filled with potential. And as they celebrated their victory, Voss couldn't help but feel a flicker of optimism. Not that he'd admit it out loud, of course. In the end, they were a mismatched crew on a battered station, but they were theirs, and they'd proven that when pushed, they could rise to the occasion. Whatever the future held, they were ready to face it together. As the station buzzed with newfound energy and the wormhole anomaly glistened with untapped potential, Voss raised one final toast. To us, to the station, and to whatever the hell comes next. And as they clinked their glasses together, the sound echoed through Horizon Refuge, a testament to their resilience and the strength they'd found in each other. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't seem so bleak. It was uncertain and full of challenges, but it was also full of possibilities. And that, Voss thought with a grin, was a hell of a lot better than the alternative.